Yeah.
Well, tell us about the approach to Piano Man. You've been playing with Billy, I assume, for 18 months, two
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Yeah.
2 years. Yeah. And so it was time to change labels.
Right. And that story is well-known history.
Yes, it is. So, from the executive room, one night, Marilyn, my wife, and I, and Bob Romaine, the road manager, sound man, and his girlfriend, we all came to the executive room and sat at the piano on the bar stools and you know yucked it up with Billy in this in the executive room.
This is where
Billy,
Billy was playing incognito in Los Angeles to
yeah,
escape his
and
contract. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and he was one of the a music industry writer was at the same time going to New York, and he was going to be gone for a month or two, and so he let Billy and Elizabeth use his house in Malibu to stay at while they were gone, like house sit. So he would venture down to the executive room on Wilshire from Malibu and put in his 5 nights and four sets or whatever,
Yeah.
and wrote the song Piano Man from that experience. Um, and while the attorneys, getting out of the one contract and getting and getting Billy onto the Columbia contract. So that was a space of quite a few months.
Right.
And
And
so go ahead.
well, what were you doing during that 3 months?
I was just hanging and just freelancing, but mostly hanging out. While they got that together. Um, but I was always able to come back into town and and pick up where I left off with other established bands, etc. And then go on the road when it was time to go on the road. So
Right.
I was kind of fortunate there that I had worked with enough people that I had a pretty good list of people to fall back with, and so then so everything's ready, and Billy has now gone into the studio to record the album with Michael Stewart. And, this is with the production players, all excellent, excellent people. Ron Tutt on drums, etc. Michael O'Madian arranging the keyboards and the songs. And so I guess you could say he's taken Jimmy Haskell's place, from Cold Spring Harbor. So
Right.
Billy wanted me to so they were all going to do all the tracks because Billy had a time constraint on it, and so part of the just using the studio players was part of getting it done, as quickly as possible, and so Billy wanted me to play on the track Captain Jack, and so
And you did.
yes, yeah, I came in. And Billy's now given me an opportunity to be shoulder to shoulder with major amazing icons who I would never have dreamt I would come together with. The bass player Wilton Felder, and Michael O'Madian, of course, the major arranger, Richard Bennett, who was a major recording session name and on acoustic guitar, Mike Deasy on lead guitar. I think it was Mike. And Adam, I'm in this wonderful euphoria again. Being a little intimidated, but trying to control my intimidation to perform. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and we actually did a pass at Billy the Kid as well, but when it came time to judge, they went with Ron Tutt's version of Billy the Kid, and so
Do you
so
have a
I
version with you on there?
no, like millions of tapes and so forth. It's like I don't know if there is one.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
The tape they tape over them, or legally it's locked up legally, like all of family productions is locked up legally,
Right.
and you know what Billy went through in terms of getting Cold Spring Harbor back.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 1983, what Billy had to go through. Otherwise, so consequently, it's just in my mind. It's still my performance on
Yeah.
Billy the Kid.
Yeah. That's a rough tune. It's a very
Oh, it's a wonder.
complicated.
Oh yeah, and that was part of the wonderful challenge. When I compared Billy to Elton John, Elton was very wonderfully smooth groove, um, and open and beautifully simple. Whereas Billy, yeah, you had to concentrate on a lot of difficult things in arrangements
Yeah.
as to what to come up with, because Billy could really play all those songs by himself, and there is just a lush amount of musicality and vocals going on already. So you really have to pick your spot.
Yeah, and that song is one of the most complicated of his songs.
Yeah,
It's very long, and it's arranged
yeah,
for it's a beautiful orchestral arrangement in that song, and there's tons of hits. Ba 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 ba.
yeah,
Dum bum bum. You can't
yeah.
just keep a four to the floor on that thing.
No, and for me, it was part of the excitement that I feel privileged to have been given, in that a lot of like Traveling Prayer,
Yeah.
Brushes, uh,
Did you play
and
on that tune?
I didn't play on the recording, but I'm obviously it's
You were
on.
on the MMR version.
Yes,
Yeah,
and so
one of my
what
favorites.
yeah, and what became a major challenge now was to take the intimacy of Brushes in the studio, Adam, and then bring it to the world on
Yeah.
a stage in a 10,000 seat stadium, where you're still the opening act,
Right.
and go, okay, well, now it's time for Traveling Prayer. And I've got to hope that Brian or Bob out front, will give me a little bit of latitude here and push the drum vaders, because I'm starting the song, so that you know I've got some volume behind me, because I'm just here on the snare drum
Yeah,
with
yeah.
with Brushes.
The drum part of that song is one of the most wonderful parts about it. It starts with did
Yeah.
the session drummer that played on Piano Man, did he take his cue from you? Did you show him how it was done? How did he end up?
No, he took it from my part. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and did a
And
great job too. It's a beautiful
oh,
track.
Ron, yes, he did. Absolutely he did. And so, yeah, so it was like, you part of in the recording situation as a sideman, session player, whatever, mode is you might not, um, your track is kind of, um, a little susceptible to re- being replaced if it falls a little short in some
Right,
way,
right,
and
right.
so that happens. I've had, I've been replaced, but I've also replaced other people on other songs, and been in that same mode. So it hurts a little, sure it does.
If
But
it can happen to Don Felder, it can happen to you, right?
well, exactly,
Right.
and with Captain Beefheart's song, that's exactly what was going on.
That's right.
He liked what I was doing, so he said, I'd like to see if you work on my track, and then for me, it's like just waiting to know if I did or not, and I did.
Yeah.
So there is that element in the competitiveness of it all too. So yeah, so Ron, copped the part that I came up with, and um, and there's an interesting. So in all this, in the confusion of it all, and uh, I do have a burning question, um, on a song on the Turnstiles album. There's a song called James,
Yes.
and my burning question, Adam, and thank you for allowing me to say this, is I just don't know until I find somebody who proves it. that may be my drum track.
Really?
Yeah, it may be.
Ah,
Yeah, because it is the drum track I came up with, and did a recording of it in 1975 in Columbia Studios in San Francisco while we were doing the the live concert for a live album. We actually one day went into the studio and recorded that song, James.
hmm. Wow, I
So
didn't realize the song was that early. Yeah.
yeah, and so was New York State of Mind.
Oh,
We were
really?
doing, yeah, we were doing New York State of Mind. Yeah,
Yeah, these are songs that would later be on the album after Piano Man.
right,
Street Life Serenade came after, and then came Turnstiles, which Billy produced himself. And so
right.
it's a little odd that these songs didn't end up on Street Life Serenade.
Well, they successfully had, had all the songs for Street Life. So, put it out and then put out The Entertainer as a
Right.
single, you know. What was happening then was the Piano Man Euphoria was starting to kind of crest. And so, therefore, at that moment, with the new album and the new single, you need to up it one more. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So
Yeah.
so you really need to be successful in the follow-up album to keep you going, because this may level you out, and therefore you kind of will have to struggle to keep the momentum going again. So the Entertainer was the single from Street Life.
That's interesting that that was the single.
Yes,
It's
and
not one of
so
the two hits.
right, and of course it's the song about the nuts and bolts of the
Right.
music business.
All the things you're not supposed to say.
Right, and so, but see, that was what gave the song impetus and strength,
Yeah.
was that somebody was willing to let you know what was going on a lot of the time. People like Neil Young, and his deal with the record company was, he was doing the same as Billy, going, no, Piano Man, in Neil's case, it would be a song of his that they would want to shorten down to tailor it to AM radio, right,
Right.
etc. And so that meant cutting up your song, and it was like, oh, wait a moment, this is the length of my song, you have to work
Yeah.
it, and because it was too easy for them to go, well, we've got a 3-minute version, so now we're good, we're going to get all the radio play that we need, etc., because they don't have to be scared of a 5 or 7 minute song here
Right.
that's taking up valuable commercial time. So Neil Young was doing the same thing with his label. No, your job is to work my songs,
Yeah.
and so if my song is complete at 4 or 5 minutes, that's the way it is.
Yeah. And Captain Jack and Billy the Kid are both extended songs
Yeah,
that survive the process. And The Entertainer
and,
too. The Entertainer is not a 3-minute
yes.
song.
Yeah, and it once again, like the other songs of Billy's, has wonderful components in dynamics and changes,
It's an
between
arranged song,
intros.
yes. It
Oh
builds.
yeah, yes, yes, sir. And then it breaks down at the right moment, um, basically to set up a wonderful surging last verse, chorus, and end.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's doing it all right. It's perfect.
And was widely covered, actually, even though it's not a
Yeah,
hit, covered by all
yeah,
sorts of interesting
yeah.
people.
Here's one. The Merv Griffin.
Really? That's one I didn't know.
I figured
Yeah.
he did it on his show. I saw it.
I bet you could find it on YouTube.
Oh yeah, yes,
Merv Griffin
absolutely.
is the entertainer.
I
That's
am.
great. Did he? Wow. Did he do all the lyrics? I think that's not quite
Yeah,
ready for
he did.
prime time, that song.
Yeah, no, he did the whole song. He
Laid
didn't.
all kinds of girls. He said that on his show.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
And that's the power to Billy. That
Yeah.
yes, they felt, perhaps that I this is such a masterpiece of a song that I really have to do it all because Billy, I don't want to disappoint Billy.
Right.
And then you had later on Dolly Parton did Traveling
Yes.
Prayer, and
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but previous to that, when we did Midnight Special, Helen Reddy did. Um, you
Didn't
may
she do
have
the
to.
Entertainer?
No, she did "You're My Home."
Oh, yeah, yeah. Right.
And see, and Billy was, he just I don't know, because when we would do that a couple of times, that song, he would mention, and Helen Reddy did my song.
Yeah. I wouldn't complain, and whether I'm a fan of Helen Reddy's or not, I wouldn't complain if any famous person did one of my songs. I'll tell you that right now.
Billy always knew what he was doing, and so to that end, when he wrote New York State of Mind, he really had Frank Sinatra in mind to
Yeah.
do it.
Did Frank do it? I don't believe Frank ever did that song, though, did he?
Later on,
Yeah.
however, but who did Columbia get to do it? Barbra Streisand.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yeah. And I heard, who did I hear? I guess I heard Mel Torme do it. And
right?
I think Tony Bennett probably did it.
He
Yeah.
did, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And later on in that live situation with Billy, that
Yes.
series, yes,
Right.
they the duets,
Yes.
and so that's when Tony Bennett did. And here's a neat thing for me too. On the Kennedy Awards show
Yeah.
that they honored Billy,
Right. It's a beautiful show.
I heard that he was going to do "She's Got Away" from Cold Spring Harbor, and so I was really keen to know how they were going to do that song, because once again, Adam, from a drummer's point of view, there is a lot of tricky, wonderful, sensitive situations to have to judge where to come in and where to stay out, and what actually to do when you come in, and so which was a lot of Billy's material. It's just that's the vast, huge, wonderful canyon of his talent. And so now I was curious because Don Henley was going to sing the song to
That's
honor
right.
Billy,
That's right.
and so we're talking about top shelf here. And
Yeah.
so the band and the arranger, I'm curious to see what the arranger comes up with for the drummer to play on "She's Gone Away."
Yeah.
And I was very, very happy, because what they came up was basically what I came up with too. So
Oh, that's nice.
I'm just, I'm bloviating, I know, but
No, no, no. It's really neat to imagine that you play something on a record and who knows what's going to happen. And then 30 years later, you're
yeah,
hearing your drum part
yeah,
sung with Don Henley over it at a Kennedy
yeah,
Center honor. That's
yeah.
that's that's your that's basically your drum song in there.
Yes, exactly. And so, it was my level of what I came up with, that, yeah, indeed, um, that person, the arranger and the drummer, that's how they heard the drum part too.
Yeah, that means your drum part
Yeah.
has become an essential part of the song. It isn't something that you
Yeah,
break out
and
from.
and and, and what I gave to it was it had a worthiness.
Yes, yes, which comes as no surprise to me, but I guess it's a nice surprise for you.
It is, yeah, and as you can imagine, the history of "She's Got Away" and a lot of that stuff. When Artie got to, reissue Cold Spring Harbor, well, understandably, I knew what he was going to do, and sure enough, he did.
Yeah,
"She's Got Away." He stripped it, therefore stripped the drums and everything else,
right.
just back to piano and voice, like he
Yep,
did with "Tomorrow's Today." And
right.
so I expected that, so I wasn't disappointed. So that made 30 years later hearing the drum part and going, yeah, that's wonderfully similar to what I did. You know,
Wow. Oh, that
Yeah.
adds a method. I think you can hear
Well,
a
yeah.
little bit of drums on
Yes, you
the.
can, because on the original track, I bled just a little
Yeah.
from the bass drum, just enough into Billy's and the piano mics, just enough to stay there. And Adam, I actually got a little royalty check for some performance that She's Got Away was played on, and I'm not sure if it was because they heard the bleed of the drums, so they had to pay the drummer.
Good for you, Rhys. That's great. That's
And
great.
or the other theory is that um, wherever they researched who played on the track,
Yeah.
I I came up. I left out. I came up as the drummer on that track, and so they had to pay me accordingly. Because this would have been some television show or something in Tokyo.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
You know, so they don't know. Their job is to research who the players were on that song because they have to pay for the performance royalties. And so
Yeah.
I even think I got a check one time that really might have been going to Ron Tutt, but they sent it to me
Oh
instead.
no. I guess you are on tot of beer, huh?
Don't tell Ron.
Oh no, I won't. No way, and no way he'll see this. So, okay. So you played on a track of Piano Man. You get to play Captain Jack, maybe the best
Yep.
track on the album, and
Well, thank you.
then you're back on the road with Billy.
Yep, back on the road, and now uh, we have Don Evans on acoustic and electric guitars, and so Don and I are the continuing foundation band, to which Billy adds a bass player by the name of Patrick McDonald and a, a fifth wheel, and the fifth wheel turns out to be Tom Dunstan, or Tom Whitehorse, as his stage name goes. And Tom was he's on a couple of the Street Life tracks.
Okay.
All right.
Well, playing
So
what? Playing.
he's playing pedal steel and banjo.
Got it.
Yeah. So banjo on Traveling Prayer and pedal steel
Oh
on
yeah.
some of the other songs. And the basic band is Don, myself, and Patrick on bass, and Tom. So we go out as that configuration, and that was a wonderful moment too, because now the other songs that we're going to do from Piano Man, etc. Now Tom has to add, some pedal steel. So he's giving some of the songs like Billy the Kid a different flavor
Yeah.
because pedal steel is now playing leads on
A-
Billy the Kid and stuff like that.
And you may be
You
able to
know?
hear some of that on the Songs in the Attic album then.
Yeah, you could. I mean, there's obviously one tape that's out there of a live concert is a live concert in Memphis, and
Mhm.
that's out there floating around, and so gave us opportunity to hear how we sounded as a unit with this kind of different pedal steel and banjo,
Yeah. Right. But
and
which are used so effectively on the albums too. Very effectively.
oh yeah, yeah. Michael Stewart did a really good job. It was just um, it was just still that one element that Billy didn't have yet, and that was the band that went on the road was desirable to be the band on the tracks.
Right.
He still was in the production mode of Michael Stewart being, the decision maker on the picking of the songs, and therefore the production deal that Billy signed with them. And
Right.
so he wasn't there yet. See what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Those two albums, he still wasn't basically in control
Yeah.
because, and it was always a frustration to have to deal with, you know, I want to use the band, but still can't get there yet.
Yeah. Now, the band that he ended up using on his first album, where he got to use the band, bears no relationship to this band that we're talking about.
No, no.
So, how do we get from you guys to Turnstiles, in which he's using all these East Coast musicians?
Right. How we get there is we uh, I guess they decided the Entertainer as a single, and therefore the Street Life album, was starting to plateau, as Billy put it. Okay, and which meant that he was now, as he said one time, he said, "I'm kind of right now at a level of Dave Mason, and therefore um, the momentum has plateaued. So I need to get the momentum back to keep moving up.
Right.
Yeah. Now I'm not moving down, but I'm not moving up. I'm plateaued.
Dangerous
And
place. Yeah.
yeah, so now you have to readjust and change the shape of the amoeba accordingly, and hope that that will work. So what Billy did was um, he and Elizabeth uh, decided to move back to New York on downtime from touring, and Billy had and Elizabeth had my wife Marilyn and I over for dinner one night, and and he said, we're moving back. He said, Hollywood, it's not for me. And yeah, it was always that way because Billy is such a wonderful, staunch, born and raised New Yorker, and totally in support of his hometown. And he said it in his writing and so forth. And I'm a New Yorker, and he would let people know just how much of a New Yorker he really is. So
Yeah.
consequently, yeah, Hollywood was Hollywood, and it was like when trying to write songs, and then there'd be a knock on the door, and there'd be the plumber to fix something, and then the plumber would start to talk to Billy, knowing who he was, and say, I got the song. Can I get my guitar? Swap it for a wrench and play you my so because everybody, it's the way it is, and
Right.
and so so he was it wasn't his place, and so he and Elizabeth moved back, and they got a place up the Hudson there, rented a place, and Billy continued writing, and now he's back home now, and so we um, so this next tour was the plan was to do a live album with the live band because Billy still wanted that concept, So now we are going out, and it's the live band. And so what Michael Stewart and Billy and the record label set up was a 4-night, 2 shows a night series at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. They roll in a remote truck to record the whole 4 nights, and
Never
uh,
released.
never released. And Michael, was obviously he was the overseer and producer, and he had his favorite engineer with him, Ron Malo, Marlowe. Ron was excellent,
Hmm.
just like everybody Michael picked. Ron was excellent. So they, we did it the 4 nights remotely. And what the idea was to pick out um, different performances over the 4 nights and make an album. CDs weren't quite there yet, so make an album of a live album.
Right.
All right, and so in amongst that, I think maybe they were aiming for James to be a new single. And if that was the reason, yeah, we went into the Columbia Studios and recorded that track. And and we did it like we did everything else. Everything was live. There was always very few overdubs. The
Hmm.
only time that there were overdubs was when you had all this horns and string layers, etc. And Billy wasn't that much of a fan of that either. He
Right.
liked to keep it simple, liked to keep it organic, natural, spontaneous. And so in doing that, Billy was also um, leaving Los Angeles behind. And so in leaving Los Angeles behind, um, he, kind of settled in to continue. And he didn't really find anything in those 4 live songs that he wanted to use. Um, there is a CD,
Okay.
yeah, of selected performances.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Floating around.
well, it's in Sony's archives.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
well, it's amazing to think that the entire 4 nights must be somewhere. That would be quite an enjoyable listening experience for a lot of us.
yeah. And so what they did, they went in and mixed it, um, and the idea was to put it out in the same way as a bonus CD um, on the re-release, the reissue of Street Life. That was this live recording CD was going to be the bonus there, like WMMR was on the Piano Man release
Right.
on Sony Legacy Edition, right?
Yeah.
But I was talking to Jeff Schock about it at the time, and what was going on was the uh, the download invasion was in full swing, and therefore being able to download as opposed to buying stuff, the major names were being affected by that, and Billy wonderfully said, I'm not putting out any new material in 1993. I think, as a personal theory, that he knew that with the download situation now, anybody could get a hold of anything,
Right.
and when it came to the Legacy reissue, it just was selling accordingly, which wasn't a whole lot. It wasn't doing that great, and so I think what happened then with the concept of Street Life reissue, with the bonus CD of the live performances at Great American, they just said, maybe Billy said, shelve it.
Yeah. That's too
And
bad.
so what he did then was, yeah. So what he did was he then set about putting the new band together. And by the way, the one bass player who was, I forgot to mention, because Pat McDonald was only there for just a couple of tours. Then Billy replaced Pat with Doug Stegmeyer.
Oh, okay. So Doug
Yeah,
came in midway.
yeah. So now Doug was in the West Coast band, so to speak,
Hmm.
um, for a good year. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and therefore he's also on those live performances, and he's also on the live performance at Bert Sugarman's Midnight Special. That Doug's on that, and so consequently, Doug was Billy's lead person for putting players back together in New York and putting the New York band together, because he also wanted
Ah,
a New York players. He still didn't have New York players, and so Doug said, "Well, I've got, I'm in a local Long Island band called Topper, and Liberty DeVito is the drummer, etc., and Russell Javers, I believe, and Richie Canada.
right.
Okay, were in that band. So Doug brought those wonderful players to Billy, and Billy went with that, and they did versions of the songs that were the current ones, like New York State of Mind, etc., James, etc. Um, and Billy compiled an album himself called Turnstiles, and so that's where I wonder if my track from San Francisco may have survived,
Right.
and because the track itself is my part. I just don't know if Liberty played it or it's my part. That's because it's exactly my part.
I understand.
Yeah, in the same way Ron Tutt played my traveling prayer part,
Yeah.
um, and then so uh, that was Billy's new album for Columbia.
So in the
And
process,
yeah, and in the process there, he couldn't. He wanted through whatever channels he wanted to get a producer who was willing, to be confident in the band and their musical abilities.
right?
And so I just heard, at that time that possibly one of the producers at Columbia was, on track. Um, but there was this guy, Phil Ramone, and maybe between Paul Simon, Clive Davis, um, they were willing to wait for Phil Ramone's schedule.
Yeah,
And so they've got Columbia, or now at whatever time they became, Sony bought them out. They have the Turnstiles album to chew on,
right.
and so it was. So therefore, um, it was a moment in time. Turnstiles was a moment in time there, whereby Billy gave them product, and because it was necessary to, and then be able to get together with Phil, and see if he wanted to produce. And he apparently, and understandably too, uh, he got it. He heard what was going
Yeah,
on. He got it. He is a New York producer, has New York sensibilities, etc. And he knew that this was so powerful, but it was in a powerful New York state of mind.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and
Well, this
so
gives
yeah,
new meaning to the name of the album, Turnstiles, because it really was
yeah,
a train
it
crossing over.
it was a transition. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, and Billy obviously he did the same thing. He went to it on it, and and so used those, used Doug and Liberty and Richie uh, Richie and Russell, etc. And so Phil Ramone, it transitioned to Phil Ramone, and they did the Stranger album. And Billy now had his comfort place.
right.
He had great songs, but he also had a community of support musicians who came from bands and had that same sensibility, and they were all excellent level players on their given talents and instruments. And so um, when I first heard the Stranger album, Adam, I listened to it with great anticipation, as to, well, this next move, this next record move of Billy's, how's it going to be? I I've got a fairly good clue of being able to judge it, uh, experiencing Billy for 4.5 years myself, and what I went through, and all the goods and the bads and so forth. But the goods were euphoric levels, like I said, and so um, I didn't get far into the tracks, like from the Stranger track, and went, "This is goosebump time.
Yeah,
This is so good." Billy's gotten he's gotten his way. He's gotten a producer who, he knew um, he could have an excellent marriage rapport with, and that the main ingredient being that he will use the players that is my band. And for me, I don't, nobody else would get this because I'm coming from my own experience. You know what I'm saying?
yes, I
And
do.
and so I heard it right from the Stranger, and the whole album, and it was just unbelievably great. And the unbelievable part is it was really wonderfully believable, because he'd achieved what he was trying to do all along with
You,
him and his band.
Well, I have to admire your attitude. It's immensely professional. Was there no
Yeah,
sense of loss or jealousy or anything in being replaced in this way?
I gotten over that.
Oh, so you did
Sure.
feel it
Oh
initially.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Heck yeah. I'm sensitive, and I knew that things weren't the same anymore at a certain point, and it was between Billy and I. Um, you know, I feel, I felt that as a friend, uh, he wasn't my friend, and I needed to, uh, I needed to deal with that and come to him and ask him if he was still my friend.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I knew that having to ask him if he's still my friend meant really that we've had a distancing here.
Yeah. Was that while you were on the road with him, or was that
Yeah,
after the? Yeah. So you could already feel it, and you
yeah,
could feel that he was dissatisfied with the band as it was, and you knew there was a change a coming.
yep. And I hoped it wasn't though. I suppose after a month or two in upstate when Billy Elizabeth moved up the Hudson there, I called him um, and because the phone had been silent, as in silent telephone with Rosalinda,
Right.
and so we talked, but he he maintained a level of he was still in the process of getting it together, but he never said that I was not a part of it.
Right.
He just said, well, we need to get a did get this played, but I knew that no, he would probably already have gotten the Liberty and the other players already, and because he's got to he's got to move on,
Right. So you could
and
your
yeah,
professionalism was such that you could read the writing on the wall, essentially.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, so I remember in Memphis at a moment of anxiety and going, I just need to talk to Bill before tonight's concert. We were back at the hotel getting ready, and I went and knocked on his door, and he didn't answer, and I kind of got the inkling from not answering because I knew he was there. I knew he was in his room, and I knew that my opportunity, was at that moment, um, and so anticipating what was probably a reality was just something I had to deal with, and so when it came time now to, I knew the Turnstiles album, but I didn't have it. So I knew that it would have been a compilation that he kind of had to put together to give the record company product.
So you were playing with him after the Turnstiles album came out. You were still on
No,
the road.
no, no. That was the transition point.
I
Yeah,
see. I see.
yeah.
So
That was between 75 and 76.
okay. So the tour
All
for the
right.
Turnstiles album included the new band then.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
so, yeah. So, and then at that point, it was, you know, just waiting to get the final key ingredient and a major ingredient, and that was Phil Ramone.
Yeah.
Just
Well, go ahead.
no, so to steer it and pilot and 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 one ingredient that was really strong in comparing, the previous um, producers was that uh, Phil Ramone was hugely comfortable within his own abilities to produce, that he knew that he could just let this thing do its own thing, and he
Yeah.
would just help guide it, but he didn't need to do very much anything other than deliver it in its beautiful raw form.
Right. Or occasionally, put his foot down and insist that a different sax player play on just the way you are.
Well, did he do that? Are you,
Oh
are
yeah,
you
yeah. That,
okay? All right.
that's Phil Woods.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he would
Yeah, yeah.
occasionally.
So he, so Yeah, yeah. So, because I'm coming from um, uh, not having to think about the Stranger album and think beyond what I knew from my experience with Billy
Right.
and association and personal life, that he'd achieved it. So from that point on, I didn't have to worry about it anymore because I also moved on into other musical situations, and it was just so undeniably good that I knew that this was the album that would now get him over the complete global and universe top, and it's all wonderfully natural. And he tried to maintain that throughout, and he finally achieved it. And so when it came to now the nuts and bolts behind the scenes of how the tracks all went down in that evolution, for me it was just Billy's and Phil's right moves were that they maintained Doug and they maintained uh, Liberty.
Yeah. Did you
And
have
I knew
conversations with Liberty?
we've met a couple of times. Yes, I met Liberty in on Long Island. We did a concert at Hofstra University, and Liberty came. And of course, Liberty would have been coming because of his connection with Doug. And
Right.
so Doug Stegmeyer is the wonderful bass player. And so, yes, afterwards, we went to a late night diner and all sat together. And I'm sitting there across the table here is this drummer who I know is Doug's band. And he's bearded and he's got kind of an afro. And I believe maybe at the time um, he was available.
Yeah. What do Billy Joel's two drummers talk about? That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, so it for me it was intimidating, and but however we exchanged the pleasantries and all that, um, and so the next time we did Staten Island, and we did a university concert in Staten Island at a college, I believe, and Liberty came there too, and I saw him come in the entrance right out the other end of the auditorium, and went, oh, Liberty's here again.
Well,
And so we hung out afterwards and exchanged pleasantries as much as two drummers in that scenario could,
okay.
and left it at that. So the next time that I heard Liberty playing was his drum tracks on The Stranger, and I was elated because I knew that you know I didn't know his playing because I didn't kind of take any notice of the Turnstiles material. So I'm kind of hearing The Stranger complete and for the first time. It's a virgin listening. So what what Liberty's contributing here is just as powerful a talent on drums as Billy is at vocalizing, piano, and songwriting. And so
That's a very
it,
generous thing to say. That's really neat.
it was euphoric. I was really happy. Now it it stayed at that limit though,
Sure.
and so the nuts and the bolts from then on was such that it was going to be uh, such a happy thing to see the basic foundation after instruments after the piano is the important ones, drums and bass, because that's the rhythm section basically. I mean, with guitar, yes, but in this scenario where you have piano as the lead rhythm instrument, bass and drums are the next, wives in the marriage.
Right.
And I knew that Bob Romaine had once told me that Billy always liked to have a strong drummer. He always liked the association of being with a strong drummer. So I felt good to hear that because John Small and Olivia DeVito, strong drummers,
And
and
there you
that's
are in that company. Yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, so I was fortunate enough to yeah, kind of rub some shoulders with them. I never met John, but I knew also powerful drummer, and I knew that from Attila,
Right.
and I knew that from You Got Me Humming, or from the single from the Hassles.
Right.
Yeah, and Billy knew that too because from the Hassles, Billy got into starting to write songs and went with the Lee Michaels concept, and it was John, and therefore, between what he had to do on piano and what John had to do on drums, you had a lot of space and air to fill, and so John had huge capabilities of doing that really well, and so I was glad to see that Billy maintained Liberty and Doug throughout, and rest easy, Doug. It was a tragedy to me to I asked Jeff Shaw at one point. Jeff Ward was the manager of the executives that became, in a sense, um, Helen Reddy's husband. Um,
Oh.
and so I said to Jeff, what happened with Liberty? I mean, with Doug, because I know that it was a tragic thing. I knew that Doug had a studio. And anyway, it was it just got difficult in the way that usually it does in a longevity, recording and road situation. It gets difficult,
Yeah.
and 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 it got difficult for Doug, and so
Difficult in that it affects your private life and choices you make.
exactly, because the whole personal, it's a very very intimate personal life that you're living. It is. I mean, it's more intense to me than a marriage because it is a marriage.
Right.
Yeah,
Which can make it difficult for your partner.
but it's a whole industry called divorce.
Yeah. I have a Billy Joel question that I have always wanted to ask him and that I've never heard him answer in an interview. And perhaps you can shed some light on this. And it speaks to
Okay?
his sense of humor. I've noticed that on his records, it doesn't say side one, side two. It says one side, another side. Nobody's
Mm-hmm.
ever mentioned this before, but I wanted to know.
Mm.
That seems like if that's a Billy decision or if that's somebody else's strangeness, because that's a very odd thing.
See, I don't think so. I think that's very natural.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But by
yeah.
odd, I don't mean that it's unusual that it shouldn't be there, but just that that seems like something that Billy would have done. Like,
Yes,
like
and
he's always thinking about the other side, and there's always another side to the story, and I'm going to put this on the record.
yeah, and that's what it's from. Yeah,
Oh, so
and
you know for a
you
fact
know,
that's the case. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, because when it comes time to the packaging, for instance, well, Billy's got to make decisions on how the album is going to be packaged, and that becomes graphic artwork, etc. And the liner notes, what's going to be said, because this is making history here, or you hope it is. But
Right.
anyhow, but it's all part of the creating the album. The album jacket becomes part of the creation too, and which unfortunately CDs kind of made it very difficult to
True.
maintain that. Yeah, so in their creative process, um, Billy would have, someone might have suggested, or Billy, and so instead of side one, side two, let's make it, one side and another side, because yeah, you can justify that by going, it can be one side of Billy and then another side of Billy.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
you see, and so those things are all part of the natural process of your creating. And Artie Rip, he has some of that in him too, you know.
Mhm.
And, uh, and so consequently, Billy, and that's kind of keeping it organic too, because it's, the record graphics department is going to come up with what they come up with. And of course, they are very much distanced from your personal endeavors here, that they have to, like a support player, they have to read it and come up with what they are perceiving, what they're getting from it, right?
Right.
And so that's a very deep distance to have to travel to come together and get close. That's the intimacy I'm talking about. Is what you as a musician bring to that song. Well, so the graphics department has to do the same thing with graphics. How you know, and so therefore, you come up with these wonderful, quirky, double, triple meaning entendres. Um, and yeah, and somebody reacts like you just reacted, and you go, yeah, that person got my idea, and so you use it. And so Billy's done that all along with everything,
That's
and
great.
the major acts were also doing the same thing, and the artwork in that time period of vinyl that was huge in the music business, and especially the one that blossomed here in Hollywood in the '60s and '70s. Uh, the artwork became a whole nother dimension of it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a long-winded way around saying that, yeah, one side and another side, it's kind of, it's cute. But it's right. It's real.
Oh, thank you. Now I can sleep at
Yeah,
night.
yeah, yeah.